Okay, I've said for some time now, boiler mechanic, by the way, weekly news roundup. Let's start with a little economics first. We had the producer price index come out this week. It was 0.6%, 0.6% month over month. So from the end of January until the end of February, the prices that producers pay for their inputs in order to produce what they produce for us to buy has gone up 0.6%, proving that inflation is here. It hasn't gone anywhere yet, and I don't believe it's going to go anywhere. On top of that, import prices rise for the second straight month. And a lot of people have heard in the news that the US government debt continues to go up at an alarming rate, something like $1 trillion every 90 days. So every quarter, $1 trillion more debt. I said this a long time ago. The United States is in a classic trap where the political system, in order for the status quo to continue, the politicians have to print money, have to inject it into the economy for their donors, for their constituents, and for the voters, or else they know they're going to lose their jobs. Now, that's not really the politicians' fault. That's actually the electorate's fault for not understanding economics and why it's not a good thing to be doing this. When it comes to economics, civics, and history, Americans are fucking morons. That's why I don't have much hope for this country turning around. It's going to remain stagnant for some time to come. But at the same time, our economy has shifted into an economy of grifters that don't actually want to produce anything. Most of our economy nowadays, very little of it is manufacturing. Even farming is taking a big hit. Everybody wants to be a consultant or an administrative person or a technology person or a government worker. These are all unproductive jobs. I mean, you have healthcare, which is semi-productive, and I work in that industry, although I work for a manufacturer. I work on the manufacturing side, and I work with my hands, and I actually produce something out of nothing. But most people in the country, this country today, don't want to do anything productive. They want to make money easily, and that's understandable, and that's natural. Real estate, financial services, everybody wants to have these unproductive jobs because that's where most of the money is at. On top of that, government regulation makes it almost impossible to start a new manufacturing business. Building houses isn't even easy anymore, which is why we have super low inventory. At the same time, we're bringing in millions of illegal migrants that are bidding up prices of all sorts of goods and services and housing. So, it's a real shit show, but it's nobody's fault but the American voters. It's nobody's fault but the American citizens' fault. And we're going to continue on this path. Politicians cannot stop printing money because they're being encouraged to do it by their constituents. Every time they talk about lowering spending, people start screaming bloody murder. And we need to lower spending a lot if we ever want to get out from under this, but it's just not going to happen. It's a classic trap that many different civilizations have fallen into. We're going to continue to be mostly unproductive. Demographics are going to continue to shift to where a large part, maybe even most of the population is going to be on government entitlements and not producing anything. And we're going to continue to go down this path until there starts to be some real political instability. And I'm sure we're going to do price controls before that even happens, or when we start to get unstable. There's no way we're going to get out of this or go through this whole process without somebody instituting price controls, which won't work, but it'll be tried. I see it at the grocery store I go to, which is on the fringes of the hood because I live on the fringes of the hood. And a lot of people from the hood go to this grocery store and they're all pissed off about the inflation of food. The inflation of food is the most destructive thing for a society. It's what started the French Revolution, among many others. The food inflation is what's really going to wreck shit. And I can already see it. They are complaining every time I go there about the prices. You can feel the tension in the air. And like most Americans, really, these people from the hood, they don't understand how the inflation happened or why it's happening. They just think it's just the, grocery store being greedy, and they get mad at the grocery store about it. And then they, in their minds, a lot of them think the government needs to do something about it. If you were to go ask a lot of these people, what should we do about this inflation? They're going to say, oh, the government needs to do something about it. Well, the government actually caused it because you told them to. It's a really shitty, intractable situation we're in. And the United States is better off than a lot of countries on top of that. We're seeing this sort of inflation all over the world. Except in China. I don't believe China has any inflation right now. As a matter of fact, I think they're worried about deflation over there. So this inflation is not going away. I overheard somewhere somebody say that the Federal Reserve is actually increasing the inflation target from 2% to something higher. That wouldn't surprise me, although I can't confirm it. But I've been saying for a long time that we are never getting back to 2% inflation. And I think my prediction, why not make one? By the end of the year, we're going to be around 5%. Let's say definitely above 4.5% on the CPI. It's an election year. They have to pump the government. They have to pump the economy full of money. Maybe next year they'll lay back a little bit. We'll see. So it's been a relatively quiet week otherwise. So Haiti quieted down a lot. But what's interesting about Haiti is that Kenya, so we had Haiti happen. Ariel Henry resigned on Tuesday, I think. And then the talk was, okay, we need to get this multinational force that's already been authorized by the UN there as quickly as possible. Okay, Kenya, when can you go? Kenya's like, hold up a minute. We didn't sign up for this. And Kenya basically said, you're going to have to give us more money. Because we didn't sign up for total chaos. So Kenya wants more money for doing this. I'm sure the United States will give it to them. Katie, it's funny because the government was trying to push it through. That Kenyan government was trying to push through the mission. It was challenged by the opposition in Kenya and then ruled unconstitutional. Now the Kenyan government, the ruling party, is saying, oh, we can't go because it's unconstitutional. What they really want is more money. So in Africa, we see Senegal. One story came out. So as we know, in Senegal, they're going to have elections, I think in May. The long-running president, who's backed by the United States and Europe, finally decided to agree to holding elections, even though he didn't have a good successor that he liked and that the Western countries liked. And then we see that some opposition leaders that are very popular were released from prison, and one of them's going to run. And a lot of people think, that's going to make the elections very interesting. Very big news that just happened today, actually. Niger actually told the United States to get the fuck out, get your bases out. So the United States has had bases in Kenya since 2012, going back to, I believe, right after Libya, when all of the weapons basically that we funneled into Libya, a lot of them ended up going to Niger, Chad, and those places, Mali especially. And so we used that as an excuse to offer to put in a base. And Niger at the time really wasn't in any condition to refuse that. And Niger basically said that a U.S. delegation came this week unannounced and was very condescending and started threatening the government and saying, you guys can't do any business with Russia. If you do any business with Russia, then bad things are going to happen. So basically, that's how it went down, according to this article, which draws from statements made by the president or prime minister, the acting head of state. And so Niger just said today, get the fuck out, effective immediately. You're getting your fucking bases out, United States. So that was actually a big story that happened today. Let's see what else is going on. This is an article that is talking about how several countries, Turkey, Morocco, and Iran, are all coming into the Sahel region and trying to woo the ruling governments into allowing them in and doing projects with them and all that. Chocopolis. Apparently, there's been some bad harvests and bad harvest of chocolate, and some processing plants had to shut down in Ivory Coast, which I believe it said in this article, Ivory Coast makes a significant portion of the world's chocolate. So we could see rising chocolate prices. Ivory Coast, and I believe another one might have been Sierra Leone, or one of these countries is a big chocolate producer, and they're not getting much chocolate out this year. Nigeria, what was this one about? Cost of living crisis. So Nigeria is one of the many countries that is having a lot of inflation right now. The government's having a hard time paying its debts. So this is a newly elected president. He was elected last year in a pretty controversial election. He was kind of like the status quo guy, and he won the election. A lot of the younger, more radical populist people wanted a different guy, and he's not off to a good start. So he's probably not going to last long. What happened in Congo, my favorite country? They reinstated the death penalty for basically people who are fighting for Rwanda. If anybody's caught fighting for Rwanda, you're going to get the death penalty. Angola actually is trying to mediate peace discussions between Rwanda and DRC, so that's good. Another interesting article was this one about China and Angola's mutual ties, bilateral ties discussions that are being held in Beijing right now. The president actually went to Beijing, and I was just reading about the pretty deep strategic and business partnership going on. There's a lot of trade. China removed tariffs, so very interesting. China once more making its way into the African continent with mutual respect, and it works. China showing that coming into Africa and having mutual respect for Africans and doing deals that are good for both parties actually works. Go figure. South Africa's foreign minister says citizens fighting with Israeli forces in Gaza will be arrested. So that was interesting. Going back to now a deepening sort of spat between Israel and South Africa. The two countries have never liked each other, and it's just getting worse. CIA basically kicked out of Zimbabwe. Basically, USAID, which is very similar to the National Endowment for Democracy. Basically, they're cutouts they're basically fronts for the CIA. They were both kicked out of Zimbabwe. Samantha Powers, she was very mad. Samantha Powers is sort of the head of these CIA cutout operations that are all over the world. So she said inappropriate and aggressive treatment. Okay, go cry me a river. Zimbabwe did the right thing. So this story is about a ship, a Bangladeshi, I believe, coal ship that was hijacked, and I just heard today that the Indian Navy came in and rescued the people on that ship. So very good. Qatar announces airlift to send aid to Sudan. I just saw another story, by the way, where they're saying that there's a possibility of a very serious famine going to happen in Sudan, all because there's been a civil war there. Basically, two rival generals are fighting each other in Sudan, and with that, it looks like the Sudanese army, the official army of Sudan, actually recaptured the National Broadcast Building, which was captured by the, I believe they're called themselves the Quick Reaction Force or the Swift Reaction Force. The other generals' forces captured this building in the beginning of the Civil War, and Sudan's army reclaimed control of it. So it looks like maybe the war is going their way. I'm not sure. This was just a state media story that I decided to put there. It was kind of funny, almost a clown world. Saudi Arabia participates in National Women's Day, and so they sent a delegation to New York to, talk about how great they are for women, which I'm sure they're fine to women in Saudi Arabia. Let them have their culture. I have no problem with it. I just thought it was a little funny. So Egypt's in bad shape. This is a story about how they sold a bunch of real estate to the United Arab Emirates and got a new IMF fund. Really, financially, Egypt is in bad shape. This is really relevant because I think I'm starting to feel like it's more and more likely that if Israel does move into Rafah, which I believe they probably will. I mean, I even heard a story that Netanyahu approved a plan and approved the invasion into Rafah. If they do that, I don't see how, and they're going to be very nasty to the people, to all the refugees. There's like 2 million people here, and those people are going to flee for their lives. Where are they going to go? Probably across the border, if they can, into Egypt. And I just think that at this point, Egypt is in no condition to really stop these refugees from coming in. So we'll see how that turns out. Egypt's in really bad shape. They have no leverage at this point. They're basically on the take with the United States, like most of the Middle Eastern countries. All of these monarchies and such. Turkey is basically full of shit. So yeah, another interesting story is the two different sides. I think there's 3 different sides in Libya that are basically claiming control of the country. They all agreed. I believe I forget who it was that mediated this, but I think it might have been Turkey mediated this. They all agreed to form a unified government, so that's very interesting. You have one sort of Russian-backed regime in eastern Libya that is out of Benghazi, and you have the other one in western Libya out of Tripoli that's more backed by the United States. This was an interesting story. The British are all pissed off because Gibraltar wants to stay in the EU and they want to do things, and Britain's like, oh, you're our last colony, please don't disobey us, sort of thing. In Portugal, the elections happened. Basically, the center-right party, I believe, still won, but the far right in air quotes, Chega party, which means enough party, actually made big headway in this election, doubling the amount of votes that they got. I didn't put it on this map, but of course we had Macron this week making a fool out of himself, talking really big talk about sending troops to Ukraine. Then Putin comes out and says very sternly, don't do it, Macron. We will kill your troops. And then Macron has this press conference where he basically weasels his way out of it and says, oh, well, we aren't ruling it out. So really, really pathetic display by Macron this week. UK will no longer prescribe puberty blockers for children. Very interesting. Far-right firebrand Geert Wilders to forego Dutch PM job. So he made big news couple months ago they won the election, but apparently he can't get enough people to support him to actually be prime minister. Andrew Tate has been ruled that he has to be extradited to the United Kingdom. Very interesting. They really hate that guy. Putin is getting reelected as we speak. Sweden resumes aid to UNRWA as Israel steps up Gaza attacks. So this is interesting. So basically, as we recall, shortly after, I believe, the verdict in the ICJ case, Israel came up with this allegation that people in UNRWA, which is the main relief aid organization for Gaza Strip, people in UNRWA were basically working for Hamas and they were militants. As the weeks have dragged on, Israel has provided no evidence of any of this. Most of the evidence is there's hardly any evidence to support the allegations that I've seen. Some people might have known some people. One of the allegations was that one of the teachers in the UN funded schools taught some Hamas militants because they were in her class. All right, so that's the kind of allegations we were dealing with. Like, okay, she's a teacher and Hamas people are going to be in her class. Because how can she control that? How would she even know that? So they couldn't find any actual collaboration. They could just find these circumstantial situations, which it was really dumb. So first Canada. So all of these countries, without asking any questions, of course, suspended funding to UNRWA. All of us who understand what's going on here knew that the allegations were probably bullshit because a lot like Ukraine, Israel is in the habit of just making up shit all the time, right? So Canada was the first one to say, okay, we're going to start funding UNRWA again, and Sweden was the second one. So we're going to see more countries quietly start refunding UNRWA, probably the UK if they haven't already done it. We're going to see a lot of countries do this. The United States might hold out for a while, in my opinion. Iran makes a lithium battery. It's just a state media story I wanted to put in. Lithium battery plant. So that's interesting. So they're going to be more self-sufficient on lithium batteries. This was an interesting story. United States, basically, it came out this week that the United States had secret talks, not indirect talks. They had indirect talks through a mediator with Iran a month or so ago after all of the attacks on the U.S. troops in Syria or Jordan, whichever version of that story you prefer. And the United States actually went behind the scenes and basically gave Iran some money. They basically did a release of sanctions worth $10 billion and said, okay, here you go, Iran. Stop attacking our troops. We're kind of in the bind right now. Please leave us alone, right? So a lot of people in the United States, idiots in the United States, Republicans mostly, were outraged by that. But I thought it was very funny. India, what's going on in India? They had a first test flight of a multiple launch ballistic missile, one of those ballistic missiles with like multiple warheads in it. So they had their first test launch of that. So go India. India is going to have a huge election. This was an interesting article. It just shows, kind of gives some information about the election, about the political situation. Apparently, Modi is just steamrolling over his opposition, apparently. Also in India, right here, I believe, India did some tunnel on the border in a disputed region of India. They built some tunnel. China wasn't too pleased by that. I guess most of this region over here, wherever the tunnel was at, up here in the mountains, it's disputed. The border's disputed, and China's like, yeah, that's a provocation. Bangladesh is expanding its offshore oil drilling. Interesting story that came out today. Chinese scientists implant first pig liver into a human. They used a brain-dead human as the test subject. They genetically modified the pig liver, and this is basically a big step to using animal organs on humans. And so that's a very interesting story. This story here, another provocation from Philippines. They're going to invite U.S. companies in to do oil exploration in the South China Sea. And that's this gave me one of those aha moments. Like, okay, now I see, besides the weapons deals, a big part of all of this provocation has to do with allowing U.S. oil companies to come in and search for oil. The National People's Congress was this week. One interesting, this story made the rounds. It's a good meme. It's an excellent meme. Here we have Kim Jong-un in a tank, apparently. He was driving the tank, although a lot of people say there's no way he was driving the tank. But this is just a great meme photo. Japan's workers get a 5.28% pay raise, biggest in 33 years, which is actually amazing to think about, startling to think about. So apparently, and I think I put a story about this the other week, that there was a big union negotiations going on in Japan, and they finally got a 5.2% pay increase. So that's okay, I guess. Mexico, interesting story. Mexican detectives searching for 43 missing students disappeared themselves. So these detectives who were working this cold case, this is a 10-year-old case, they disappeared. So the cartels took them out. El Salvador removes income taxes for money from abroad. So if you're getting money from abroad, you're not going to have to pay income taxes in El Salvador. That'll be really good if you're an American expatriate. Panama Canal is actually having some issues, and we're seeing this all over really Latin America. There's a big drought going on now here in Florida. It's been raining like crazy this season. We didn't really have a dry season, but all over South America, Brazil, everywhere else, they're having a serious drought. I did a story the other day, last week, about Mexican water shortage in Mexico City, but apparently the Panama Canal gets most of its water from this lake, and that lake is getting really low. Now they need the water from the lake to operate the locks, which actually raise and lower vessels up and down as they go through. So all of these vessels go through the canal, and then they get to these locks, wherever the locks are. Somewhere up here there's going to be a lock, and they use the water from the lake to push the lock up and push lock down. That's how they use. That's what this lake is very important for the water, for the Panama Canal, and it's not really. It's very low right now, so it's a big issue. They already are having problems getting boats through there. So another reason why we're seeing trade disruptions, increase in shipping costs, and so on. And what happened down here? Argentina, $65 billion bond swap. So they're swapping basically bonds that are due to be paid back by the government soon with bonds that are further out. That's what they're trying to do. So that's about it. That was a relatively short one. What happened up here? This was interesting. Oh, yeah, let's talk about Boeing a little bit. So first of all, there was a incident out here in this general region regarding, I think, a 787. I'm not even sure. Here we have video footage they were looking for video footage for relating to the maintenance that was done on the airplane where the door blew out. The door blew off on this plane several months ago, I think, and they were looking for the maintenance footage to see who did the maintenance on this door. The maintenance footage was missing. So Boeing is up to some serious shenanigans. But the most shenanigan of all is a big whistleblower who was set to do a deposition, who showed no signs, by the way, of being suicidal, apparently committed suicide in Charleston, South Carolina. So this is the thing about Boeing a lot of people don't understand. It is a weapons company, a defense company, okay? So this is going to be a company that has access to sorts of very, very spooky stuff, in other words, like assassins and all that. So I would not put it past Boeing having their connections that they do to the US government, the CIA, to private security companies, that they would whack somebody like this. So a lot of people feel the same way. Unfortunately, it's really sad that we're at this point in our society. Biden, Bibi, this happened at the beginning earlier in the week. So basically, Biden, we find out this week that Biden actually invited the defense minister from Israel over to the United States to try to get him, to try and sweet talk him into doing something in order to stop the political bleeding that the Gaza massacre is causing. In other words, hey, go over there and try and convince, people to not murder civilians indiscriminately, and then maybe we'll, support you to be president or whatever. And basically we find out that the defense minister came here and listened to Biden and said, wait a minute, the defense minister said, no, I like the killing of civilians too. As a matter of fact, I think we should kill more civilians. And so then he went back on his way back over to Israel. So basically the thing about Israel and Gaza, and I think a lot of people are resigning themselves to the fact that they're going to go through and they're going to complete this genocide. They're actually going to complete this genocide. The Israelis are going to have a genocide under their belt by the time this year is over. They are going to be in the same leagues as Hitler, as the Young Turks, and all those people. So they're going to go through with it. Nobody's going to do anything about it. Nobody in the Middle East is going to do anything about it. And the United States is not going to do anything about it. The United States is going to help Israel do it. So this is going to be a really disastrous PR problem for years and years to come, not only for Israel, but also for the United States. I mean, basically, Israel's done. Israel is destroying itself, just like the Germans did. And I've talked about this before. But anyway, that is my shtick for today. I am out.